Greetings everybody, the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage here. I am making a video. It's a continuation, it's a series of videos on this Janome free arm machine. This of course is what I call a hybrid vintage sewing machine. This is something I recently decided to focus on, and part of the reason I did this, you're looking at the bottom of the machine, you will see it in other videos, and I'll explain why I did this. This is something I recently decided to kind of put some highlight on. As those of you know, what I call heirloom vintage sewing machines are those that are all metal. They were made for many decades, and they were made, the hundreds of thousands, and I'm going to say probably millions of them. And there are quite a few still left, not as many as there would have been, say, a half century ago, but still quite a few. And it occurred to me fairly recently that many of you will either have a hybrid vintage sewing machine, or you may see one and not know that it's a hybrid. And by that I mean it is part steel. It may have lots of metal and steel parts, but a few of those parts are going to be plastic. And when I say parts, I'm not talking about the knobs, I'm talking about the mechanical parts, the parts that are under stress. And no one could blame you if you didn't know, because when you see an old sewing machine, it's vintage. This Janome is from the late 70s, so we're looking at 40 years old. Hard to believe. And but anyway, some of you will have these machines, and I thought, I really need to sort of just share. I wanted to share with you what I think about them and why, with a sort of a more restricted equation for how much time and effort you should spend on these, that you can justify maintaining them. And there may be ways to do this, and I have discussed in some of the other videos on hybrid versus heirloom. There are times when you may have to decide that you're not going to keep working on it. You may not be able to if a plastic part should break on you. But so far, you folks, if you've been following me along with this Janome, or these hybrid machines, I have a whole nother, I've got that Brother-made Eaton, the beige machine that you saw in the other video. I haven't even touched it yet. And even though it has more steel and less plastic than this Janome, it's a tad bit older. It actually is in worse shape right now because it's stiff. It's been sitting longer than the Janome had. So I turned the Janome upside down, and I've been showing you guys the inside, and we're going to peer in the bottom. Now, if you see some of the older heirloom machines, if you've ever seen me take them and turn them up and look underneath, you can see all of its drivetrain components there. Most of them are easy to access. I mean, you open it up and you see everything. Of course, with the Janome, as you go through time, just as I've been showing you, I think I showed you when I was servicing the motor on this machine, they've got a cover on it, and then I have to sort of wiggle the motor out of the cover. So over time, they're making it more challenging for the customer, for the owner of the machine, to service their own machine. And this is something they did gradually. This Janome, this is the top of it. The good news is you can still remove the top, but there are no holes like you would have seen in machines from earlier decades where you could oil it yourself. And again, you can take this off and oil it, but you can tell they were gradually trying to make it more difficult for people to maintain something and keep it in service, at least without having to take it in and pay for that service. So we've got, what you're looking at here, you see 4 large bolts, and these bolts will actually separate this entire base from the main body of the machine. But then there are 2 smaller access screws here, and there's a panel. And this tells me that this is the primary way that you would access the machine to service it. And that includes just lubricating it, because you can't, like I say, with the older ones, you get right under there and just put your oil where you need to. Here, no, it's a little more complex, but that's okay. It's not that complicated. And it's certainly not a reason, not to keep one of these machines. So I'm going to take my, this is a Phillips head, and this one is easy actually. This one's not stiff, fortunately, so I'll just do it by hand. Take out this little screw, And with Phillips particularly, I've noticed you got to be extra careful to not strip screws because they will strip easily, and that just creates more headaches than you need. So this little panel, little steel panel comes off. I'm impressed, at least that's metal. And now you can see, let's zoom in for you guys, and you will, come on zoomer, and you will see what I'm seeing here, which is, this is what normally you would have had access to more easily, but there it is, and we see some steel components. I like what I see here. There is a way to access further down the machine in the free arm, but we're going to do that from up top. So I'm going to look, I'm turning the hand wheel. Hold on, let's engage the clutch. Actually, yeah, there we go. And I can see movement in the mechanism of the machine. You can see it there. So it's moving pretty freely, unlike the beige Eaton free arm, which is going to require a lot more, I'm going to have to put cleaner in there to get it unlocked. So let's say you didn't have the manual to this machine, but you know how to sew and you think you can figure out how to make the machine work. You think, well, how do I know where to oil it? Well, there are a couple of things to focus on. The first thing is you'll notice when you move the hand wheel, you can see what's moving. And again, by the way, I've unplugged this machine. Obviously, you don't want it plugged in when you're working on it. And when you turn the hand wheel, you will see certain mechanisms move, not necessarily all of them. But in this particular spot, there's a little hole here in this arm, and that's an oiling point. That's a little spot you can put oil. See if that's going to show up. I don't know if you guys can see that. There we go. I wanted to move the camera. I really wanted you to see this. There's a tiny little hole just about the size of a pinhead, and you can put oil right here. Now, eventually, a lot of times when I have an older machine, I'll go ahead and put one here because I know that may or may not be, yeah, those two pieces are sliding against each other. And when metal moves against metal, that's a pretty clear hint of a place that you want a drop of oil. Now, I always tell people when you're doing your normal oiling maintenance that you want to basically use one drop. Because again, these machines do not have oil pans. And if you use more than one drop of oil, you may find that you have quite a sizable mess on your hands because the oil is just going to drip down and get on things in places you don't want. But if you have a machine that is dry and it's been sitting a long time, it's okay to put maybe 2 drops. You know, you may need a little extra if it's thirsty, but normally you would not. Now let's see. Let's keep turning this. Now, if I turn my stitch length adjuster, you know, sometimes you might want to move some of the knobs because some of these linkages move not when the hand wheel is moving, but when the linkages are. And you can see eventually you will kind of get a good instinct for, you know, you want to put, again, I'm just putting one big drop, one blob here. And I'm trying to get oil in places where there's going to be friction. Just like with the engine of an automobile, you're going to want to provide lubrication for metal on metal contact. That's one of the most important spots. Now, let's see what else we've got here. I don't see anything else immediately that would need oiling at this point. I think I've covered most of these. You may want to put a flashlight. Sometimes it's hard to see. I'm getting fairly decent light here. Now on the side of this machine, they provided a, turn this around, see if you guys can see the side of it. They actually provided, see if this is showing up on the camera. I'm going to have to zoom back out just a bit for you. There we go. They provided like a little access port on the side, and this is plastic. When I pull it out, I can get in from the side. It's not entirely clear to me why this is here, because I prefer to get under there, but I can look at it sideways. And what I'm looking at essentially is just a side view of this, and there may be other reasons. Maybe the service manual would show why that was necessary. There's nothing wrong. I always like more access than less, but I'll just put that back in. It's not really going to be useful for me, but it might be for someone. Now, as you can see, you know, getting access to this was relatively simple. sometimes having a machine with a cover is advantageous. You can see where old oil and grease has fallen before, and it's nice to catch that, because if you have a machine that doesn't have a bottom catch, you may discover that if you put too much oil, that oil is going to drip, and it may drip on your floor or your carpet if you have it set on a rug or carpet. Now, as I mentioned to you all before, there's a little something I always like to do. I need to get a little bit more space between me and you guys and the camera. I will take 1 drop of sewing oil, and I'm going to put it on these little screws. I didn't have a problem with these, but again, it takes no time, and by doing this, what we are essentially doing is kind of, we want to proof it for the future so that it can be accessed again, and no one will, it may be you won't have to fight with the, screw and potentially strip it because it was stiff. Again, when you're dealing with steel components, they require, this is a steel, this is metal on metal, and you want to be sure that a little sewing machine oil can make life a lot easier. And the main reason that a lot of old machines create a lot of challenges for those of us who overhaul them is that they haven't been serviced in a while, and the old sewing machine oil has gotten gelled up. Oil will stay in a liquid state for a long time. By the way, I just tightened the screw, but I didn't torque it. I just kept turning until it snugged, and I immediately stopped because I really do not want to strip these screws, and there's no need to. That panel should stay put just fine by snugging it. We're not, I sound like, I sound repetitive sometimes, but it's easy to forget. People will take a screwdriver or a ratchet and they'll just torque and tighten these things down like they were holding up, something really heavy, and they're not. So watch out, I'm turning it and there it's snugged, boom, I stopped. Good enough. And actually will make it easier for that to come off in the future if we have to take it off. So, okay, we're going to turn this machine back up. Back up. Now, hopefully, what you guys just saw was, this was essentially, let's come back. What you saw me do was just a quick access. I want to look underneath. Whenever I go through a machine and give it a full reconditioning, I'm experimenting with that word, reconditioning. What I really want to do is, let's let you get a little bit more of the picture of this late 70s Janome. What I do is, part of the approach to this is providing maintenance in one section at a time. Sometimes if you look at a machine and you think about all the different areas that you might want to overhaul, it can be kind of daunting. It's like, oh no, where do I start? You don't have to do the whole machine at once. In fact, it can be practical for many of us, because many of us, we're doing this as a hobbyist. It's not like our full-time vocation. And you can make progress with the machine by doing a little at a time. So don't feel like you have to sit down and do the whole thing. That would be, I certainly don't. And then that way I'm not rushed. I can take my time with the machine. So in the next video, I'm going to take off this section, and then we're also going to talk about this little door. As I mentioned to you all, it's made of plastic, and we will see what lies underneath here and what might require any kind of cleaning or lubrication. But fortunately, we have access screws, and when you see access screws, that's a really good hint that there's probably something in there that needs servicing, and this machine has gone some amount of time without it. I don't know how long. Anyway, thanks for watching, folks. I'm going to, like I say, I'll make a separate video on this section, and then we're going to talk about the hand wheel and something that I have discovered with this hybrid machine, and you will hopefully those of you can help me decide just how much time I want to spend maintaining and keeping into service a hybrid vintage machine, which is relative to the new machines is high in quality. It's not an heirloom quality, but there may be a case to be made for at least maintaining and keeping these hybrid machines in service as long as we can. Again, we don't want to be wasteful, and I think you can make a case, again, not paying very much for these and not spending 20 hours of overhaul unless you want to. That choice is yours. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.